guys, now we have a wonderful lady who helped organise the Monsanto protests. This woman is an angel. You know, she's helped me with a lot of the geoengineering protests that I've pulled together. She's got a heart of gold, and she's going to come now and educate us all in Monsanto. Give her a massive round of applause. Woo! Laura!
Hi, everyone. I feel really shy now after that introduction. Thank you, Mona. Thank you. That was really nice. Kind of in my weird overkill geeky sort of mode, I've created a massive speech at like 3 AM this morning of like 10 pages. And I managed to cut it down to like 8. So I'll try to speak up. Sorry, it's kind of low. I'm too tall. Okay. I don't know if anyone knows much about Monsanto already, but they're basically a huge multinational corporation that are involved in countries all over the world. They claim that they can't exist without farmers. They say that they're the customers and livelihood of our company. More important, they are the support system of the world's economy, working day in, day out to feed, clothe, and provide energy for our world. With such glowing statements of praise for farmers and a beautifully communicated sense of love and kinship with communities and the earth, you'd think that Monsanto are a real gem for the planet. However, this isn't really the case, as you'll soon find out. So, in actual fact, Monsanto, better known by many as Monsanto, have an incredibly sordid ethical history. They're responsible for causing an estimated 125,000 Indian farmers to commit suicide, and they have an army of lawyers who are basically there to sue innocent farmers for the fact that if any of their GM technology and GM seeds get onto their farmland, then they can essentially sue them for what's known as property theft, which, you know, is pretty ludicrous. So, especially when, you know, considering that these seeds can be moved across by bees, birds, human influence from like vehicles or just human movement, anything like that. There's no biosecurity whatsoever, absolutely no biosecurity. And the wind carrying pollen. So at any point in time, this GM technology could be put onto someone's land, which if you're an organic farmer, it can completely ruin your whole livelihood. So, and on top of that, not only does it ruin your livelihood because your crop is contaminated, Monsanto will then sue you for it because you've stolen their property. However, they have only now promised that they won't sue anyone anymore, and that's supposed to be decent protection for farmers. But not really. But along with the suicides in India, it's just absolutely terrible. They're forcing farmers in India to be in such a situation where they absolutely cannot sustain their own livelihoods. They went out there, these Monsanto salesmen with their glamorous suits and all that jazz, and they were like, oh yeah, take on these magic seeds. They're magic, they won't have any parasites of any kind. They're completely, humongously amazing. They go out there, they sell these things to what are unfortunately mostly illiterate farmers, and you know, they see these suits and the glamour and you know, the fancy shades and think, oh wow, you know, these guys probably know what they're talking about. So unfortunately, they get duped into buying these magic seeds, and what actually happens is the result of which is actually this parasite called the bollworm has actually completely ravaged the entire GM cotton crops that they've been buying. And on top of that, Monsanto, unlike previous seeds in countless generations before now, they don't allow you to be able to save your seeds and then re-sow them in the following season if, for example, the environmental conditions are unfavorable for their propagation and cultivation, which has happened for a lot of Indian farmers in the past, where with the Indian climate is kind of temperamental in that at points there can be enough rainfall, other points there can be too much, and sometimes there's a massive drought, in which case, you know, the seeds won't grow at all. And farmers normally would try and save their seeds, but they can't do that because of something called terminator technology, which has been bioengineered into the seeds so that those seeds cannot be saved and resown. And the idea behind that is completely cold and calculative by Monsanto, because the idea is so that they can make as much profit as possible, so that they force you to buy seeds every single season, which, you know, in terms of calculative business technique, that's quite impressive, but in terms of ethics and just downright common decency, it's not cool. Unfortunately, a lot of farmers have been forced, in India, have been forced into situations where they're in so much debt they've had to take their own lives just to free their family from that debt. And it's completely destroying families out there. I mean, can you imagine if your father had to go out and swallow insecticide because of that? It's absolutely horrific. And yeah, so I'll go and talk a bit about Monsanto's, shall I say, influence on scientific research. And basically what's happened is, you know, this lovely institute that I used to have some respect for because my old supervisor worked for them for a long period of time, called Rothamsted Research Institute. They have lots of ties with BBSRC, Biotechnology and Biological Research Center, no, Research Council. I always forget their name. And basically, the unfortunate thing is, a lot of the scientific research published by these people is incredibly industry biased, because not only do they have multiple representatives from industry like agricultural industry and agro-biotechnological industry, such as GlaxoSmithKline and Syngenta, DuPont, and a couple from Monsanto. They all take up residence of boards on these, in the BBSRC. So that means that they ultimately have the final say of who actually gets published, who can say what in science. And to make it worse, the BBSRC have said they brought out a gagging order on any scientist, whether they're a former fellow, a current fellow, or anyone wanting to publish anything with any of their publicly funded research, that if they were to go in the opposition of GM technology, then it was deemed to be taking the side of conspiracy theorists and going to more of a not ideal political kind of forefront. So they decided, yeah, it's not a good idea if you guys do this. However, if you want to say good things about GM, then of course you can publish anything you want, which is incredibly unfortunate, which means that there's no actual unbiased opinion in scientific literature anymore, because it's all become industry controlled, which essentially means that Monsanto can actually control, to an extent, Monsanto and other agricultural and biotech companies can control what scientific literature is put out there and what scientific literature therefore concludes. And Rothamsted itself has actually been implicated because their partner laboratory in China, run by Guangyang He, was actually found to have created fraudulent research whereby they were testing GM wheat and they completely fabricated all the results to be in favor of GM technology. So Rothamsted tried their very best to try and cover that up, but people can dig stuff up. Good for us. So just gives you a basic idea of the kind of scientific corruption that's happened in the scientific community, which is really unfortunate, because as a scientist myself, you'd think, I did a lot of referencing of journals and things like that from BBSRC and their associated journals, and you think, oh yeah, this is a great journal, you know, they're so popular, they're well-known, peer-reviewed, it's all fine. In actual fact, it's all completely industry-controlled, which is really sad, because there's no actual unbiased opinion left at all. It's all completely controlled. So, going back to GM technology and Monsanto, I don't know if, I mean, there's a lot of controversy about scientific studies regarding this, because I'm sure you've all seen the rats with the huge tumours from Seralini's study. Well, that in itself is a different story. There's a lot of controversy about that in itself, because the type of rats that were used are prone to mammary tumours in the first place. However, instead we're the ones to try and point that out and say, oh, this is all wrong. But in actual fact, every single safety study that's been done on GM technology has been done using those rats in exactly the same time period. So in actual sense, if you are to criticize Seralini's study showing tumours were a result of GM feed, then you could easily then say that every single study proving that GM technology was safe wasn't valid at all, simply because of that. So despite Seralini's case, a lot of studies have now come forth, and there's actually been a huge petition from scientists. Like, I think nearly 900 scientists now have signed a petition claiming that GM technology is not fit to be exposed into the environment. And that's because there's been no actual safety studies done on it whatsoever. There's been no human trials. There's been no long-term studies. There's no real idea on how GM technology can impact from one generation to the next, let alone in just one person over a decade. Because the longest studies that's ever been done were 2 years in rats. And I don't know what your opinions are on vivisection, but I think it's a load of crap, because vivisection is just useless. Vivisection is testing on animals and then trying to superimpose that into a human organism, which is just completely rubbish, because I'm not a rat, so anything that affects a rat is not going to affect me in the same way. But I think I'll finish with talking about how Monsanto are actually trying to move into more of an organic point of view now. They're trying to... Their viewpoint is, well, I can't really say for their viewpoint, but they are trying to cultivate more organic produce, in the sense that they're trying to make it taste sweeter, taste nicer, that sort of thing, to try and win back the hearts of the consumers. So is that just a case of Monsanto trying to get people to fall in love with them again, trying to regain trust after the GM technology failure? I don't know. But what I can say is that ultimately, unfortunately, unless you buy completely 100% organic produce, then we're all at the mercy of an unregulated, irresponsible, uncontrollable, potentially irreversible genetic experiment. And that's all I'll say on that. Thank you.